Hi, I'm Milena. Welcome back to my channel. It's been a while since we sat down and really talked about books. If you're newer, hi, I'm Milena. I'm a bookseller, booktuber, classics lover, historical fiction lover, non-fiction lover, lover of romance since recently, and I read 6 books in January. I read a romance, a historical fiction anthology, 3 historical fictions, and a classic. The classic I read for readalong I'm doing here on YouTube called the Thomas Hardy Readalong, and we have just finished our first book, which is Return of the Native. I will mention really quickly that our next read is gonna be The Trumpet Mayor, or Major. We're still not sure how to pronounce it. The Return of the Native. I just reviewed this for you and then I noticed my microphone wasn't plugged in. That sounds annoying. Alright. The Return of the Native is probably one of my favorite Thomas Hardy books. If you don't count Far From the Many Crowd and Tess of the D'Urbervilles, those are still top tier 5 stars for me. So The Return of the Native is about Climmy O'Bride. He's one of the main characters who comes back to the Heath. And the Heath is a typical Thomas Hardy English countryside or UK countryside, and some set in Wales, I'm not entirely sure. Okay. He returns to his native village. We have Eustacia, who is the femme fatale, who also lives there with her grandfather, but she is not really happy on the Heath. He returns to his mom and to his cousin and to a lot of people who work there, and in the beginning of the novel we get to know them really well, which I enjoyed. There's a group of working class people who all live on the Heath. They have a really big respect and some probably mythical religious respect as well for the Heath. They work off the land, they work with the land. We meet a Readalman, which I didn't know what it was, but that's apparently someone who works with red dye because their skin is all tainted red, who is called Diggory Van, and he is supposed to be this morally superior man who starts from a low background and works himself up. Behind his rough exterior he is this amazing man. But this book also has unreliable narrators. This book has a lot of misconceptions. So while reading this book, it's really wondering who is a good person in this book, and if there is even such a thing. It is wondering who is morally grey, who is not, and who is actually a really bad person, and how that is all connected to class. It's really interesting to talk about this book. Clem surprisingly was one of my favorite characters because he went through such a character development, through such a journey. I don't really know if you can call it development because I don't know if he became a better person. He went through a lot, mentally especially, and he just went through life struggling, all the events of life having an effect upon him. So he was one of my favorite characters. Eustacia, who is the femme fatale in this book. Every Victorian novel needs a femme fatale, don't they? She's the femme fatale, but we also have Damon Wildheath, who is like the bad man, who we also often meet in Thomas Hardy, his books. And they had really a Heathcliff, Cathy, Wuthering Heights kind of vibe going on. And their relationship, just like in Wuthering Heights, explodes the life of all the characters, doing the morally right thing and how that is connected to nature, to the Heath. Such a big part of this book. I quite enjoy this. Not my favorite Thomas Hardy because of course like Tess and Far From Many Crowd will always be like those 5 stars, and in my opinion they are his most well-read books for a reason. But this is definitely up there, which I did not necessarily expect because I don't hear that many people talk about this book compared to, for example, Jude, which I did not really love. I read a non-fiction which was also for a book club read, and that is Uproar, Satire, Scandal and Printmakers in Georgian London by Alice Loxton. This was not really what I thought it would be. It is exactly what it says on the tin, so it was really me that these expectations did not really match. This is a very detailed, almost narrow view of what it says. So we have 3 sketch artists, that's not the right word, they were satire artists, and they would make prints that their printers would put in their windows and talk about. And it will be a reflection of the political situation going on. So we follow these 3 artists, their lives, but also some of the royal lives, so how that was reflected in their prints and everything like that. But the book was a bit of a mess to me as a reader who does not have already detailed knowledge about this time period, which I think you definitely need to really enjoy this book. But beyond the politics, I just found the illustrations really interesting. So I listened along with the audiobook, and there are points where the narrator talks about, for example, this illustration, and there's a whole bit where they talk about it, and then I would just listen and look at all the details in the illustration that were described, which I found incredibly valuable. I would have missed so many little details in this single illustration. This is an illustration of George III, whom I do know a little bit about him, so I did understand like the more political parts of it. But having someone describe a satire image to you was my favorite thing of this book. Very special about the Georgian time in England is that there wasn't any censorism on these prints. People could print whatever they wanted, and apparently people in charge found them funny as well. Most of them, at least. I think is such an important thing to think about, the freedom of the press, to draw whatever they want, because none of these drawings are flattering at all. Which of course is the point, because they are satire of the French Revolution was a big part of this as well, which you can see right on the cover. So those parts I really enjoyed about this book, but I think the general information that it brought me was probably too specific to one country and one specific period of time. I think a book more general about satire and printmaking I would have enjoyed more, but that is not what this book says it is, so that's me, like, not the book. But yeah, I think the general value of the book may have been higher as well if it had taken a more broader approach to the subject matter. Another part of that I think is that the writing didn't really work for me. I had a hard time obtaining the information, which is of course part me lacking a certain part of political knowledge, but it's also the author trying to use satire in their writing, and that just didn't really come across for me very well, which can be a cultural thing. Again, I'm trying to find some nuance within it, but I don't feel very inclined to read more by Alice Loxton. But if you do have some knowledge of Georgian England, this book might be easier for you to grasp, and maybe you will understand and appreciate the satire in the writing a little bit more than I did. My favorite book of the month, which, I mean, it shouldn't have surprised me, but I love this so much. And that is the trouble with Mrs Montgomery Hurst by our very own Katie Lumsden. Also, great cover, by the way. Love the little shine on it. This was wonderful. I think this is also technically Georgian. No, it's later. It's later. Regency England. This is, no, not Regency. Wow. This is Victorian England. This has a beautiful kind of Victorian setup that reminded me of Middlemarch and Cranford, where we have this village. In this village we have Mr. Montgomery Hurst, who comes home after his travels. He's been traveling for a decade. The villagers, or the people who live in the village, have not seen him very often. And then he comes home, married to a widow who has 3 children. Of course, all the ladies of some standing are incredibly surprised why he would not marry a debutante, because that would make more sense to them, but why he marries his widow with 3 children. We meet a vast cast of characters, which was intimidating to me at first. I had a hard time because I was listening to the audiobook, and I did switch to the physical. If you're just listening to the audiobook, I would recommend maybe looking this up. So it has a whole list of characters. Like, this is the amount of characters. That is a lot. I mean, you don't have to memorize it at all. I love this because there is such a variety within the characters. We have the gentry, which, well, one character called Miss Elliot, who is incredibly unlikable, but I really liked her. I really liked reading about her. Then we have a brewer who is very wealthy, and his children, who are, I would say, the core of this book, because all of those children, all his children, have different connections to different people in the town, and it's a lot about new money and old money coming together. There are so many different subplots of romance subplots in this book that is just perfect for me. I love a romance subplot. Often when you have a main romance in a romance book, or like a historical romance, and then there's a side plot, there's a side romance, I usually love those most. This has so many wonderful, beautiful romances, some tragic, some easy, some hard fought, some secret, and just it's like everything you want to read in a Victorian novel, or like in a Jane Austen novel. This has it all. In the end, I loved or hated each character. They were all such strong individuals, which is such a feat for the character list I just showed you. I would love to spend so much more time with these characters. I would love a sequel, I would love a fourth book, which I don't think is happening. So we'll just have to reread this book. But these characters were set up so well, even though it was confusing in the beginning. Once I got to know them, I really got to know them, and I got a feel for them. I'm not even sure if their appearance is described in this book. I don't remember, but they all have an individual look to me. I can all picture them myself. To me, this felt like reading a Victorian novel, but with writing that was much easier to understand, with showing what happens behind closed doors. Like there's no smut in this book. The conversations that are held, the feelings that are experienced that a Victorian writer would not have put in their novel, Katie put in here, which results into much more diverse stories than you would have in a Victorian novel. Honestly, this book is a treasure chest. I loved it as much as some of my other favorite historical fictions like Love and Fury and The Wolf Den, where I felt such a strong connection to every single character and I could picture them so well, and it felt like jumping into their world, which is why I love historical fiction so much. I will tell you a little bit about the non-fiction I'm currently reading, but I thought it was historical and it's not, and it kind of broke my heart. Glowing 5-star, favorite book of the month for sure. Moving on to a historical fiction duology, I listened to both of these books and they are continuations of Pride and Prejudice, which I can be a little bit hesitant about. I love the idea of it, but I don't always love the way people do it because sometimes it just feels lazy and not true to the characters. I don't mind if it's not true to the time period, like if it's set in a different time, that's fun. But you need to kind of feel Jane Austen's characters within that. This duology did such a good job with that, and I'm so surprised that I don't really hear anyone talk about it, probably because they're a little bit older. The first one was from 2011, and they're called Georgiana Darcy's Diary, book 1 and 2 of the Pride and Prejudice chronicles. There is a third book, but they're not from Georgiana Darcy's perspective. Georgiana Darcy is Mr. Darcy's little sister. There's a 10-year difference between them, and he has served as a father figure to her from a very early age because their parents died. The first book was a bit hard to get into. I needed some convincing, first of all, that Georgiana Darcy was an interesting character because she plays such a minor role in Pride and Prejudice itself, so I didn't necessarily feel very attracted towards having a diary from her perspective in a way that I would, for example, from another Bennet sister, which the other Bennet sister favorite, best ever. So we get her diary entries and I love the way that was done. I often forgot I was reading her diary. She actually used dialogue in her diary, but then at some point she said things like, I haven't written in you for days because I still cannot believe what happened. And that's so intriguing. Like, intrigue was amazing in this book. And I also love that it wasn't during Pride and Prejudice, but it was after. So Georgiana lives at Pemberley together with Darcy and with Elizabeth, and we have a fictional friend of Darcy's, or they're all fictional, of course, like Milena and Mr. Darcy is fictional, who is not in Pride and Prejudice. He is called Edward and he is Mr. Darcy's best friend, which of course is the perfect setup for our romance. I would say this very much is a historical romance in a way that Jane Austen would also be a romance, where yes, a romantic relationship is happening, it's blooming, it's a beautiful part of the story, but it's not all that is happening. It's more I mean, it doesn't really have the wit and fun of Jane Austen, but again, it's a diary from Georgiana who is she is not witty in a way that Lizzie Bennet is, for example. She is very calm, very reserved, but very strong-headed and intelligent as well, and I adored her. She is such a great character in a way that the author, who I did not mention, is Anna Elliot, wrote her. I do think Anna Elliot is a pen name because it sounds too Jane Austen-y, but I will look that up for sure. The second book I loved even more. I cannot really tell you anything about the plot because it has so many fun plot twists and reveals that I'm just not gonna say anything about it. That's for you to discover. I will say that we get to see many Pride and Prejudice characters, some of whom are of course the clear villains that we meet again. But we also meet some characters that are barely in Pride and Prejudice and that are really given life. At the end of Pride and Prejudice, in the epilogue, we kind of get to know what happens to most of the characters, and this author thought to write what happened between that ending and the end of Pride and Prejudice. So a lot of the events are between the last chapter of Pride and Prejudice and the epilogue of Pride and Prejudice. The second book was such a joy to read because I had already established this bond with the characters that Anna Elliot created. To me, they were not Jane Austen's characters anymore because Lizzie and Darcy are not a very big part of book 2, if I remember well. To me, it felt like one giant novel, not necessarily 2 books. The plot could really take over and become way more adventurous in book 2, maybe a little bit too adventurous for the status that Georgiana is in. Like, she is Mr. Darcy's sister. Would she have been able to do all that she did? We go to Waterloo, all I'm going to say, but I loved it. I thought it was amazing. It was a good choice. Even maybe if it doesn't really work, I don't think I care that much because it was just such a great story. So the first book was 4 for me, the second a 4.5. So if you were looking for a Jane Austen retelling in a way, but like after the events of the book. I would highly recommend these. I love them. There are some icky moments in book 1. So Edward, the love interest, he is Mr. Darcy's best friend. He's also the same age as Mr. Darcy. So while Georgiana is 18, nothing icky going on there. She knew him, of course, when she was much younger, and there are some things said, it's all from her perspective, not from his, where I'm like, maybe stop saying that. Maybe stop saying that you've been in love with him since you were 6, because it's giving me the ick. I guess you can forgive the author because it was written a little bit earlier. I decided to ignore that part and to just enjoy the book. I mean, it's the same when you read Sense and Sensibility. If you know, you know. But that, of course, was written a really long time ago. So again, you cannot really fault the author in the same way. The final historical fiction I read, it was a really heavy historical fiction month, is The Winter Spirits, Ghostly Tales for Frosty Nights. This is an historical fiction anthology. It follows another anthology, or doesn't really follow, but I think it's the same. It's the same publisher and a lot of the same authors. So the previous one is called The Hunting Season, and this year a new one comes out called The Witching Hour. Thematically, I would like even more than ghost stories. I enjoy a ghost story. Paranormal is not really like my thing. So to me, it did feel repetitive at times, because even though the authors all have their own interpretation of what a ghost story is, there is a lot based on classic literature. One story was very Henry James inspired, another one was very Shirley Jackson inspired, and of course I enjoy that, but I also found some lack of originality within these ghost stories. 2 were horror stories, which I did not see coming, but there are a few authors who are primarily horror authors, and one story had a horror twist at the ending that made me feel sick. I cannot do body horror, that's not me. And there is one story in here that I can still feel in parts of my body where I'm like, oh, just gives me the absolute chills, which I think is what horror is supposed to do and what a lot of people enjoy, but not me. So 4 of these authors I've read from before. This is the author list if you want to have a little look. So Kieran Millwood Hargrave is one of my favorite historical fiction authors. I've read The Mercies, The Girl of Ink and Stars, and The Dance Tree. Imogen Hearns Gower has only written one novel, which I really loved and I read last year. It's called The Mermaid and Mrs. Hancock. I did not love her short story though, but I really loved her novel. And then The Binding by Bridget Collins I read years ago. I didn't love it at the time, but maybe I will love their work more if I read it now. I did enjoy her short story. The final author I'd already read was Susan Stokes Chapman Pandora, which I thought was okay. So my favorite stories were, like the one that I gave a 4.5 or higher, were Host by Kieran Millwood Hargrave, which was the first story. The Salt Miracles by Natasha Pulley. Definitely want to read more by her. And The Master of the House by Stuart Turton, which the last one I did not like in the beginning at all, but then the things it started to do in just a short story, like the magical ghostly elements of it, I thought was just so good. It reminded me a little bit of Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. Also interested to read more by that author. Overall, I am so impressed by this collection as a whole. There was not one short story that I truly disliked. There were one that I liked a little bit less. Like, I think I gave 2-3 stars of stories that I just wasn't really impressed by. But overall, for an anthology, I was very, very impressed, because most anthologies I read, they are just stories that I DNF or give 2 stars that I just really, really are not for me. But not with The Winter Spirits, and also not with the previous ones. When The Witching Hour comes out, I will give it a pre-order. I still have a few days of January left. I did make a January TBR on Instagram. I think, did I share it in a YouTube short as well? Sometimes I share things in YouTube shorts, if you like that. But this winter, I would like to read the trilogy This Beast. This Beast is Kirsten Lavransdatter by Sigrid Undset, who is, I don't know if she's Norwegian or Danish. I think she's Norwegian, because it's set in Norway in the Middle Ages. And I've just read the first chapter, the chapters are quite long, of the first book. And I would like to read the first book in January, 2nd of February and the 3rd in March, because this is really a winter book. The first chapter was already so eventful, because we follow our main character called Kristen, as she and her father and a group of people go to fetch a woman and her baby from the mountains so that they can come back to the village and get the baby baptized. Christianity is a big part of this book, I'm already noticing. Of course, very early Christianity, because this is the Middle Ages. Her father is very religious, her mother even more so, and they are way more religious than the other people in their village. And I definitely feel like when our main character is growing up, that is going to cause some divide. Her mother is already suffering from mental health issues, having lost 3 babies at birth, I believe, or shortly after that, which of course is not a strange thing in the Middle Ages. Kristen is their only surviving daughter. While they're traveling, they all fall asleep, they get drunk. I mean, Kirsten, she is very young and she gets drunk as well. Apparently, was that normal that time? I don't know. But she wakes up and she is scared because she sees everyone sleeping around the fire. And I think she wants to get something to drink, so she takes her father's horse and she walks to the creek and she gets something to drink, and then she sees this fairy woman across from the creek staring at her, and then she calls out for her father because she's very, very scared. And I hope that the whole fairy thing is going to be a theme in this novel, or in these novels. And what I also really enjoyed is that her father wasn't like, fairies aren't real, you just imagined it was just an old woman standing there. His beliefs are tightly connected to myth and religion, and he actually believed, and everyone believes, that she saw this fairy woman. I'm very excited to read the rest of it. The first book is only 300 pages, so I'm sure I'll finish that before the end of the month. And then I'm also joining, or intending to join, the Buzzwordathon by Books and Lala. I really enjoyed that she does a cover and a title challenge this year, and I've tried to match most of them. I'm going to do my February TBR in just a second, and you'll see that I've already been able to match up something. But for the title challenge of January, we had True or Lie. So I am currently listening to The Art Thief, the true story. Gosh, what's the rest of the title? I think a subtitle also counts. I think Kayla said that in one of her videos. So it's The Art Thief, a true story of love, crime, and a dangerous obsession by Michael Finkel. I had this book on my TBR because it was nominated for a prize. I think it was in the Goodreads prize. I thought it was historical. I'll show you the cover. Wouldn't you think this is historical? And I was kind of heartbroken when it's not. I mean, technically it is because it's set in the 90s, but being someone who was born in that time, to me, it's not historical. We're not having that discussion. So this is about a man who is obsessed with art and believes that by stealing it, he's liberating it. He gets incredibly obsessed by the emotions he feels when he possesses a piece of art. It's strange, but it's fun. It is told in a way that the nonfiction is giving some narrative. It's like we are with I want to say main character because it feels like a fiction, but it feels like we are with the person that this book is told about. It does have some true crime vibes, which I do not like. I mainly don't like true crime because it's about murdering women, and this is about stealing art. So I guess that is not the same kind of true crime that I dislike, but I'm about a third of the way through of this one, and I'm sure I will finish it before the time as well. Yes, the cover challenge was a pattern, and I listened to the most ridiculous but fun romance that does feature the 2 main characters, and she is wearing a skirt that has a pattern, so that fit as well. I'm not gonna say the title out loud because then I have to let YouTube ads know that I've said that word, and we're not doing that. But yeah, this is a series of brothers, football players, who all fall in love, and this is the first book. We follow Trixie. She's a librarian and she owns chickens. I already like her. And then the oldest brother of the group called Chris. They've been best friends since childhood, and Chris has always had a crush on Trixie. And it has this great family Bridgerton-like vibe, but it's set in current day. It's friends to lovers, it's fake dating. I really enjoyed the setup and just the feel of the family. There was some weird dramas and some weird monologues in the third act of the book, which was a hard no for me, to be honest. So I think I gave this a 3.5 because I really loved the beginning of the story, but the way drama was added to give it the plot some spice, I guess, just didn't work for me. I think I'll pick up another one of the books with one of the other brothers if I feel like it, but it's definitely not high on my TBR. If you want to read something fun, ridiculous and smutty, I would, I guess, recommend it. There is some good, I think something that really made me think about Trixie's mother, who's a sex worker, or who was a sex worker before she became a mom, and the way she's viewed. I think those are discussions, especially in romance, that probably really deserve a place. So I did appreciate that, but that of course doesn't really change anything about the fact that I didn't really enjoy the third act of this book. Okay, we're gonna do something fun for my February TBR. I don't really feel like using my TBR board again, so I thought for every month that I'm doing a video like this, I could try and create a different kind of TBR with a different something kind of game. One of my favorite tarot decks, which I don't really use very often, but one I really like is one about female authors. So let's grab that and let's find 5 books for me to read in February. Definitely want to get on the TBR. The first one is for the Buzzwordathon that doubles up, which is Watership Down by Richard Adams. For the title is Waterwords, and this is of course Watership Down. And for the cover prompt it is a skyline, which of course this is a skyline. I have read the first chapter of this one. I was thinking I was reading a children's book, but it had a lot of blood and violence. So I am very, very curious about this. Another one I would like to add, but I can also add for March. Maybe I should add it for March, I'm not sure. The Trumpet Major by Thomas Hardy, which is going to be our winter read for the Thomas Hardy read-along. And the second book in the Kirsten Lavransdatter series. So since I'm only going to do 5 tarot cards, I think I should probably leave this one out so I can... It's very thin as well. Maybe I should read it closer to the live show at the end of March and just try to put these ones in there. Alright, so this is the Literary Witches Oracle, the 70 card deck and guidebook. It also has, I think, a book that tells a little bit more about the authors. I should get that one. But for now, I think this one is really, really pretty. Okay, so there is, I forgot that there is a little booklet with explanation. So that might help me find a little bit more of a prompt. The prompt is not to read a book by the author, but just something that has some buzzwords or the same vibe. Because I don't only want to read classics, of course. Oh wait, it's not all authors, I believe. Wait, let me double check. No, okay, wait. I will make sure I select the authors and I'll be right back. Alright, I'm back. This is just the authors. So let's grab one together. Right. This is Maria Sabina and the prompt is healing. So let's read a little bit about it. Maria Sabina, 1894 1985, wow, who could not read or write and lived in poverty in the mountains of southern Mexico, is considered the greatest shaman poet or wise one of the Mazatec language. She improvised her chants during, so she did chants on mushrooms, performed to heal the sick. Her rich spiritual vision was informed by native Mazatec beliefs as well as the Catholic faith. Right, well, we have of course the images, but I feel like anything connected to either music or poetry would work, or something connected to something that we see. Right, it has wolves, birds, feet. Right, I honestly think for this card, if you have listened to my wrap-up portion, I mentioned that there's a lot of myth and Christianity in this book, so I think this would actually really fit for the second book. Yeah, right, based on the part of Christianity and other beliefs that are a big part of some of the way that someone lives their life. I'm going to match this right here. Right, second one. Ooh, Mary Shelley. Okay, there's a lot we can see, of course, on this card, but let's see what it has to say on Mary Shelley. Frankenstein isn't the garish zombie story we've seen in pop culture. Inspired by scientific discussions of the day and the complex feelings of Mary Shelley had about parenting, Frankenstein is a painful tale about the creation of life and what happens to the shunned, abandoned children. Ooh, okay, so we can do a lot with that. So we can read an original story that has been misrepresented in pop culture, something about science, or something about parenthood. Let me have a little look on my shelf. Found something. It is both gothic, mysterious, which I think fits Mary Shelley, and it's also about parenting, and that is The Beholders by Hester Moussan. This is a book that I got with a blind date with a book when I went to a local bookshop a while back, and it was on my TBR because it also is part of the Libro FM ALC program from a few months back. So it is set in 1878, so the Victorian era, and it says the body of a boy is pulled from the depths of the Thames, suspected to be the beloved missing child of the widely admired Liberal MP Rolf Gethin. I think we follow one of the servants of their household. It sounds very gothic. I've been wanting to listen to this, but I felt like this is a book I want to read physically, not a book I want to read while I'm like falling asleep, because it seems like a book I really want to have my attention with. So yes, I think the parenting element is about the man and his wife who have a difficult relationship towards their son, it says on the back. So yeah, alright, that sounds good. Alright, let's give it a reshuffle, I feel like. Alright, number 3. Oh, there we go. Sappho. Ooh, love. Okay, so I should just read something sapphic. I mean, come on, if I draw Sappho, I need to read something sapphic. Before Plato and Homer, there was Sappho, literary star of ancient Greece and the first female something poet. Plato called her the 10th muse, and her reputation has survived to this day. Let me find something sapphic on my shelves. I don't think this is necessarily sapphic, but it does sound queer, so I'm going to count. This is Little Rod by Akwaeke Emezi, who is an author whose works I've all read. This is their newest release. Been wanting to read it for a while, but somehow maybe the description puts me off a little bit. It sounds incredibly sexual and violent, which I'm not always in the mood for, clearly. So this is set in Nigeria. We follow someone who has just broken up from a long time relationship, and we follow 2 Nigerian sex workers, and they collide into the scene just as everything goes to hell. Sucked in the city's corrupt and glittering underworld, they're all looking for a way out, fueled by a desperate need to escape the dangerous threat that looms over all of them. Sounds very, very intense, but it also sounds queer. So yeah, we'll see, we'll see. Alright, next one. This is Alejandra Pizarnik, I think. Solitude. I've not read her portion in a little booklet, but just looking at this tarot card, there's a book that comes to mind. I'll show you. I immediately thought of The Maiden by Kate Forster. Do you see similar vibes? I mean, I do, but let's first see if it kind of works. Born to Russian Jewish parents in Argentina, Alejandra Pizarnik was educated in both Yiddish and Spanish, but wrote in Spanish. Her poetry of imaginistic purity and surrealistic influence summons themes of silence, absent madness, and death again and again. I don't know if that really fits this though. This is more of historical fiction, mystery type of book. It's just, I think it's just the flowers and a girl on the tarot card itself. I'm gonna see if I find a book that I feel like fits the description a little bit better. I think I found something that thematically works with these 3 words: silence, absence, and madness. This could be my next Daphne du Maurier. I saw Mary review this and it really sounds like those 3 words. We follow a professor who goes to this home, and I think there's some time traveling involved, and there's those 3 words involved. Finds himself transported into the 14th century and he witnesses intrigue, adultery, and murder. He kind of loses his mind throughout that. So let's add this one for the tarot cards. I think we have 4 now, yes. So one more. I have a modern classic, a literary fiction, a historical fiction, another classic. Ooh, I could do with... I think I maybe want a non-fiction, something genre bending, or possibly something lighter, depending on what works. But usually when it comes to lighter reads, I am such a mood reader. So for example, if I want to read a romance or a fantasy, ooh, I do want to read Angsty Storm, by the way, I mood read them. I don't really like to put those on TBRs. Alright, Oh wait, grabbing the wrong stack. This is the author stack. Okay, the last one. Ooh, I'm nervous. What are we going to add? Anne Carson, The Intellect. Okay, so yes, we're definitely going with a literary fiction. There's one looking at me right now. I don't have an unread Anne Carson left, or would have picked this one. If you don't know who Anne Carson is, let me introduce you. Anne Carson is such a good writer. Anne Carson, a prolific writer of poems, essays and various literary hybrids, works with themes of lost family members, love and loss, religion and the intellectual tradition. Sounds amazing. Autobiography of Red, superior, but let's see, I have a few literary fictions. These are a few literary fictions that I've not read yet. 15 Wild Decembers, which, should I read it in December? This is a Bronte book. Orbital, this is sci-fi, so it doesn't really work. The Dreaming, which is a short story collection. The Argonauts by Maggie Nelson, which is a strong contender. And then Slum Virgin by Gabriela Gabizon Camara, which maybe that's non-fiction, by the way. Okay, so the things that are drawing me most. Oh, I also have A Delicious Life by Nell Stevens. If I'm going to look at intellectualism, I definitely think Maggie Nelson is the biggest contender, because these two are historical fiction and I have no idea if they are also literary in any way. And I feel like if I grab Anne Carson, I need to read something literary. So let's do The Argonauts by Maggie Nelson, also because Maggie Nelson also writes genre bending, just as Anne Carson does. What is it about? A timely and genre-bending memoir that offers fresh and fierce reflections on motherhood, desire, identity and feminism. I have nothing else that would fit better except for Anne Carson's own books. So I think this is genre-bending. Blues, one of my favorite books, was also genre-bending. It felt like snippets and short stories, but also very short essays or diary entries. It felt like it could be anything. And I think The Argonauts is the same. So this is, oh, here we go, my TBR for February that I have set. I will probably read some fantasy or romance, whatever I'm in the mood for. But again, I don't think I'll be adding these to any TBRs because I don't enjoy doing it like that. These are more books that are like contenders to become my favorite books. And I just want to schedule the reads. Argonauts by Maggie Nelson, so genre bending non-fiction. I have The House on the Strand by Daphne du Maurier. Kirsten Lavresdatter, book 2. And then I do of course have a book that didn't really fit in, but Watership Down. Literary fiction, Little Rot, and a historical fiction, The Beholders. I think that makes sense for February. February is a short month though, so I might see if any of these have an audiobook. Maybe Watership Down will be a good audiobook. If you have any advice on that, or if you know any good narrator who has narrated this book, please do let me know. If you have any thoughts on books that are on my TBR, please do let me know. I would love to know your thoughts and feelings. I could ask you as well. I ask Instagram people. I ask people on Instagram to let me know if there are any authors or subject matters you would like to see me talk about. Which sounds a little bit self-important, like why would you care? But maybe you do. Maybe you have an author that you think about a lot and that you would like to watch a video about. Please do let me know in the comments. The next video that I have already prepared but am yet to film is a beginner's guide to George Elliot, which I'm very excited about. I feel like BookTube is changing. It was already changing last year, but last year just, I mean, I love BookTube, but I did not have the time for it, and I'm trying to make space for it again. I think it's a little bit more about actual books, a little bit less about lifestyle. I think I'm really going to keep lifestyle elements for Instagram and really just sit here with you, or stand here with you as I'm doing right now, and talk about books and talk about authors I love. Talk about the literary world, which I'm learning more and more about now that I've been a bookseller for a year. So I just really want my booktube channel to be books and to really get in depth about some things with you. So if you have any suggestions of things you would like me to talk about, you would like to discuss in the comments, do let me know in a comment in this video, because I want to make things, of course, that I'm passionate about, but I find it very, very inspiring to see what other people like. And I find that really helpful. When I see a comment or someone sends me a DM, it kind of gets the ball rolling to where I want to go with the video. I think you can expect one of these videos a month that I'm doing right now, where I talk about the books I've read and the books I want to read. So the next one will be at the end of February, hopefully me reviewing most of these books. Maybe all of them, I don't know. And I'll find a new game to get my March TBR ready. And I'll see you then. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope that you have a lovely, lovely evening. Doei!